that the religious Zionist community considers the government to be holy, kadosh, and Frank and I like to talk about this aspect a lot on our show. And we like to say that, if Rav Kook was here today, he'd slap these people upside the head. So where in God's name did they get this idea from? Where do you think they got this idea from?
Well, got what idea?
That the government is, kadosh, and they cannot make a mistake and all these things.
The prayer for the state of Israel states, and the belief is that the state of Israel is the beginning of the sprouting of the redemption. And it's also recognized in the teachings of Rabbi Kook that the people who began and built the state of Israel are not necessarily the people who are loyal to the Torah of Israel, or they're sort of from a different worldview, and why that has to be that way, why the state has to be built that way. However, it's recognized that things are not perfect, but generally the idea is to put the emphasis on the positive. The question is it possible to cross a line? Is it possible to cross a line where it's already, things are unacceptable and things must be put right? And if they do have to be put right, what is the proper way to put them right? We have seen that random indiscriminate acts of violence are counterproductive at best. It doesn't help anybody, and that's not what when people are very frustrated by the situation they find themselves in, they don't really know what are the ways to deal with these things. But there are ways within the framework of democracy, and I've spoken about that in public. Before I spoke about it to Rabbi Hanania in the past, but I think that's going beyond the scope of your question. Your question is where they got this idea from, and I believe that the idea is a stubborn hanging on to a desire to remain positive and to look at the bright side and remain optimistic about all the good things that exist in the state. After all, we're allowed to move here. The Jews were not allowed to do for 2,000 years. After all, we're allowed to hold weapons, which Jews were not allowed to do for 2,000 years. And we're allowed to walk as Jews and dress as Jews without being harassed, et cetera, for the most part. There are many things. Now, it's not mentioned that the state of Israel is the only place in the world today where there are territories where Jews may not enter, or else he's taking his life in his own hands. It's the only place in the world where by law a Jew isn't able to purchase land in certain places. But that's, again, you can bring up a lot of negative things. But if you're asking about where they get these ideas from, I believe that they think that they're serving the cause of bringing the redemption closer by staying loyal to the state and staying positive about it, and just keeping up the morale. That's what I think.
Frank, do you have anything to ask or comment on about that?
Yeah. So.
Hi, Frank.
I can't. Hi. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I can't imagine that Rav Kook could imagine that at some point in the near future, people are going to lose basic common sense. Because even though some aspects of what he's saying are obviously true, right? But, he didn't think that he would have to explain a basic idea like he would have to explain it to a potato, essentially. Because obviously, if you take that idea, and you take it absolutely literally to its very extreme, then, it's very similar to, I don't know, it's almost like bears publishing some kind of newsletter for salmon, telling salmon it's okay to just jump out of the river and directly onto a plate for the bears, you know what I mean? And the salmon have to agree with it, that it's holy to do so. That's a very absurd metaphor, but it's pretty accurate. And I'm shocked that there aren't more people in the religious Zionist movement that can see that. I mean, it's almost like it's very cultish. You know what I mean? One of the things that indicate a cult are people who stop asking questions and they stay in the compound, so to speak.
Yes.
And I can't, obviously Rav Kook would be disgusted. I mean, it goes without saying to anybody with common sense that he would be disgusted with the leadership of the modern Zionist movement, religious Zionist movement. That's just my opinion.